I'm Joey Lawrence. We're on the campus of Arizona State University with their head golf coach, Tim Mickelson. Tim, thank you for taking the time to meet with us during your busy schedule.
My pleasure.
Yeah, of course. Well, why don't you start with telling us a little bit of where we're at?
So we are in the Hobbs House here at the ASU men's and women's practice facility. And this behind us is called the Ball of Fame, which is, we just put it in about a year ago, but as former players come back to take a look at the facility, and even if they just want to practice, we have them come inside and sign their name if they want to write a little quote about their experience at ASU. They're able to do so. So as you can tell, we've got a lot of former players that have come back on both the men's and women's side.
Well, that's very cool. And I'm sure you're anxious to get ready for the winter semester as well. What did you tell your team before the holiday break?
Make sure to come prepared in the spring, because as soon as we get back, we have to be ready to go.
Absolutely. Other than practice rounds, what else do you have your players do to improve, not only as individuals, but as a team?
Well, over the break and in the fall, one of the things we focused on was nutrition. So our guys are working more on nutrition as well as hydration. And then with our fitness levels, we had a great group come in called Advantage Training doing some workouts for us. We're going to continue that in the spring. So what we wanted to make sure is that over break, the kids were not taking a step backwards. We wanted to make sure they were either at the level they were at in December when they left, or maybe even progressed a little bit so we can keep moving forward.
Very good. What are some things about ASU you tell young men you're recruiting?
I don't think there's a better place in the country for college golf when it comes to the weather, the history we have, the schedule we get to play, having our home golf course here at ASU Carson, also having Papago, as well as the whole experience with what our athletic department can offer from a academic support standpoint. Our physical trainers are awesome. We have a great administration that supports us. So I feel like the whole package is what we have here in place to be at the top, and hopefully we'll continue to improve every year to be a national contender.
Absolutely, I'm sure the list goes on as well. Well, you obviously have a fantastic player and world amateur champion, Jon Rahm. Any surprises with other players, someone we should keep an eye out for?
I think you're going to see a couple names that haven't been shining that much over the last year or so, but I think we've got a couple guys right now that are going to get in the lineup this spring that are going to have the chance to really help us quite a bit. It's going to help us go from number 25 in the country, hopefully number 10 to 15, somewhere in there. And I don't want to just give specific names, because I think there's about 5 different guys that have the opportunity to really shine this spring. And if I only name 2, the other 3 are going to be pretty upset.
Well, it's good to have a few extras.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Jon Rahm, he recently received an exemption to play in the Waste Management Phoenix Open. That had to be great news for Jon and the program.
Yeah, I mean, we're excited for Jon to be able to showcase his game against the best, next week at the Phoenix Open. And it was sort of funny because in September I ran into some of the Thunderbirds I was in Denver for the BMW Championship, and I jokingly told them, hey, if Jon wins the World Amateur, I'm going to ask for an exemption. It was sort of a joke. Well, certainly Jon goes out, he wins the tournament, he breaks Jack Nicklaus's scoring record. So I called the guys a couple weeks later and said, remember when we had this talk? And they go, yeah. I go, well, we have to talk about the exemption now. So we had been working on it for a few months. It seems to make sense because of a few things. He's the reigning world amateur champion. Obviously, he's at ASU. He's a junior. He's currently the 3rd ranked amateur in the world. And with Phoenix being obviously right outside of Tempe, it's such a perfect combination. So we're thrilled for him, but more importantly, we want to make sure that we thank the Thunderbirds for giving him the opportunity, because we know that the exemptions are very precious, and for them to grant one to an amateur is a big deal. And so we're very thankful of the opportunity for Jon.
Great, and it's great to have a local boy in the tournament as well.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to put you in a little bit of a tough spot here. Who do you want to win, Jon or Phil?
Well, I'll be honest. I think it means a lot more to Jon in his career. So I would say, if it came down to those 2 on Sunday, I would have fun watching it, but I would prefer that Jon wins, because it would open so many doors for him immediately. He would have an exemption on tour, or his tour card for the rest of this year as well as the next 2. So he'd be off and running. Now that would hurt us, because he would have to sort of be forced to turn pro. Although my brother did win almost the exact same time of his college career. Phil won his tournament down in Tucson, the Tucson Open, just after his junior spring started. So it'd be the same timing, and Phil did come back. So I would try to have Phil convince Jon to come back, but if Jon wanted to leave, he'd have our full support.
That's awesome. Well, last year your team did not play in the Arizona Intercollegiate, which moved to the new Swilo golf course in Tucson. You were playing this year in a couple weeks. Have you had a chance to practice there yet?
As a team, have not had a chance to go down there. We'll just have our one practice round, which will be Sunday, and then we'll play Monday, Tuesday in the tournament. But one of our players did play over Christmas break, Alberto Sanchez, who's from Nogales, Arizona. And he actually tied the course record. So Alberto feels great on that golf course. He's already given us a few tips about how we should play the course. So even though we haven't seen it, we have a good idea of how we can prepare for the tournament. Hopefully Alberto can shoot another couple 65s.
Yeah, well, having a course record holder is not a bad thing.
Never a bad thing.
Your team played very well in the fall, placing second in 3 or 4 tournaments. You kind of touched on this a little bit, but what are you expecting for your team this semester?
Well, I think we've got a team that is very talented, and when we're able to put everything together as a team, when we have 3 or 4 guys playing well, we're going to be very, very tough to beat. The 3 seconds we had in the fall, we basically lost to the one team at that tournament that was ranked ahead of us, and pretty much we beat everybody ranked behind us. So that's sort of why we're at 25th, even though we had 3 seconds. But our spring schedule is much more difficult. We'll play a lot more teams in the top 25. So we have the opportunity to beat some of those teams, which will really vault us in the rankings if we're able to do so.
Well, you recently hired your brother Phil as an assistant coach. Has he brought in any big recruits yet?
Not officially as of yet. We are working on a couple kids that I'm hopeful that we'll end up getting. And if we get them, then I would say that Phil was certainly an integral part of that. But we actually have already moved on from Phil. Phil's no longer our assistant coach. He was done as of, I think it was January 4th. We have a current guy in right now. His name is Eric Hoos. He started on the 5th of January. Eric is the former head coach at University of Denver, where he was, I believe he was there for 15 years. Played college golf at Arkansas, played professionally on the mini tours, and actually held what is now the Web.com, but back then was the Ben Hogan Tour. He held the 36-hole scoring record at -17 for 2 rounds. So he has a lot of playing experience. He also has a lot of coaching experience. So he has a lot that he can offer our players.
Very good. Well, do you ever reach out to anyone for coaching advice?
I certainly reach out to my colleagues. There's a few that I respect a lot, and I'll call them for advice. I will also call Steve Lloyd, who's now my brother's manager, but he was the coach at ASU back in the late 80s, early 90s. I've called Coach Randy Line, who I took over for, and I'll call him for some advice as well. And then basically every coach that I've been around, I'm not afraid to ask them for advice when I don't know the answer.
And you shouldn't be.
Exactly.
Well, you played collegiate golf at a very high level while attending ASU and Oregon State, setting several records. When and why did you make the decision to go into coaching?
When I went to Oregon State, I actually had to sit out my first year because of the transfer rule. And it was in that year that when I was sort of hanging around the coaches, they were giving me insight as to why a certain player was being picked over another player. So I started in my own head as that year went on, trying to figure out who coach was going to pick. Why was, this is this type of golf course. So I think even though this guy finished 7th in qualifying, he's going to take him over this guy who finished 5th. And so I sort of had the coaching mind when I was still a player. And then I went and played 1 year of professional golf and got frustrated and basically just decided to take 3 or 4 months off. And 14 months later, I've been in coaching ever since.
Well, speaking for myself, Tim, and Sun Devil fans, we really do appreciate your time. And thanks for being our guest on Top JOX Interviews, and keep up with Arizona golf right here on JOX Sports.